I have to admit, I find that this large picture of myself is a little unsettling to me. So originally started off as a software developer. So I worked in IT. I was working in downtown Manhattan, working for a brokerage firm. Um, so the money was good. Uh, so, but as I realized I spent a lot of time while I was working. So after work, I would always kind of delve into game design. Because I had a programming background, I actually was programming. Um, and one of my most memorable at-home projects was I don't know if anyone's familiar with Xbox Live Arcade. So, but that was at a time, it was like in the Xbox 360 era where they actually gave a development kit out called XNA, and I had like built a game engine from that. So I learned a lot about how 3D rendering works and so forth. So my initial um, passion or my initial inspiration was to actually go into game development. So I went down that path, and that's one of the reasons why I learned computer science was actually to make games. Sometimes, I see exploring design space a little bit like creating your own recipe. Let's say you are a chef or a cook, right? All the mechanics and themes that are out there, they're your ingredients, they're your spices, right? So you may use like the same ingredients as another game, but you may have a completely different way of implementing that to where it's a completely different flavor, a completely new experience, right? So it's all about discovering what are all the possible different experiences you can have with using the same set of tools. Right? So what are the purposes of mechanics? Okay, so the mechanics provide the structure for these three things. We have competition, we have challenge, and we have puzzle. But I make a distinction here, but there really is no distinction between them. So for instance, I think a challenge can encompass the other two, right? Competition and puzzle. The reason I'm just making these distinctions here is because it's a little bit easier to think about these when it comes to the style of game. For instance, we talked about competitive games and cooperative games. So having competition is sort of like a core, and we're going to be talking about this in next week's course about conflict. So we're going to delve a little bit more into conflict. So I'm just going to briefly cover this portion here. So competition, challenge, and puzzle are the three things that your mechanics need to provide for your players. So if it's a competitive game, it needs to provide the structure to be able to compete with the other players. If it's a cooperative game, it's the mechanics need to provide that challenge to challenge the players, right? And then really, I put puzzle here, but that really is sort of like a subcategory of challenge. In this case, when the number of cards that you have in your hand is also like an internal resource that you need to keep track of. Other things there's some special ability cards in there. So if you haven't tried Sushi Go, recommend that. If you play Seven Wonders, that's probably an example of one that's a little bit more involved. So here, this one's not exactly a mechanic in and of itself, but it is sort of like the format of having each player have a different ability that's unique to that player. And the interesting aspect here is that those powers then influence how the other players approach the game, right? So that's their particular resource, is that their ability, and in fact, oftentimes their ability sort of dictates the negotiation and the dynamics between the players. So, and Dune is a really, really good example. But let's say you have another location, right? The benefit of that is that you simply get to change your turn order. So these things. So you think about so take a look at your game. If you have a worker placement game, this is great because you can apply this. So each of those locations, think about what are all the different descriptors of that, right? All the different elements. What are all the descriptors of that? Okay. And this is where I start to like explore how we can change the variables, how we can change the constraints and so forth. So here we go. So this is sort of like the way my mind thinks here. Okay, so I introduced, what if workers can be special workers, right? What if they have a strength attribute, right? So I start to explore, okay, what if they can have a special ability? So let's say I have a worker, let's say he's a special worker called a lumberer or a lumberjack, right? he has a particular strength, and his special, let's say that worker's abilities, he can get double wood from a location, right? That's one possible way I start to explore some of the things that we can do differently. So one of the things I want to note here is that who will win, it's not obvious based on, so for instance, if you have victory points, if there's something that is a clear indicator of whether you're winning or losing, with this particular model, it's not obvious as to who's winning here until the very end. So, and because of that, it gives a sense of excitement. So it's presenting that uncertainty of who's actually going to be winning. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Laura, for assisting. So, and I'll see everyone on Wednesday.